The tragedy of the successful Nazi invasion of France during World War II was a major loss to the French civilians, yet the brave acts of the French resistance ultimately led to a triumphant victory over the Nazis. World War II was fought between the Axis powers, Germany led by Adolf Hitler, Italy led by Benito Mussolini, and Japan led by Emperor Hirohito, and the Allied powers, the United Kingdom led by Winston Churchill, France led by Etuda Dalide, the Soviet Union led by Joseph Stalin, the United States led by Franklin D. Roosevelt, and many other countries. After World War I, France was left in horrible shape. 20% of their entire population died in the Great War, and like many other countries, France was doing everything in their power to avoid another global conflict. In addition, they were still extremely proud of their victory over Germany. Because of this, they didn't take the threat of Hitler seriously. Their military was extremely weak, they still used horses, sent messages by motorcycle instead of radio, and their soldiers lacked discipline needed to fight in a war. On May 10, 1940, the Nazis launched their attack into France. The combined force of the United Kingdom and French armies would have been enough to stop Hitler. However, he had a new strategy up his sleeve: blitzkrieg, or rapid attack. The German army quickly surrounded France and the UK's best armies and destroyed them. After this, the German army breezed through France, taking Paris, and on June 25, 1940, France surrendered. As the Nazi forces marched through the fallen country of France, French civilians suffered the effects of oppression. Many of them were devastated to find their country had surrendered. They lined the streets and booed the Germans. Some people wept. One main reason that the French civilians were extremely upset by their loss was because of a long rivalry between France and Germany. Since the Franco-Prussian War in 1861, tensions between France and Germany had been top. The two countries had a rivalry, and when France lost to Germany, it was an extreme psychological blow to the French men and women. In addition, the pure speed of Germany's victory in France was inconsequential to any other conquest. Germany had breezed through Poland, but France was a military superpower and had the support of the United Kingdom to help them. One thing that especially angered the French public was Vichy France. After Hitler had left France, he divided the country into two. The northern half was controlled by Germany, but he left the southern half under control of Vichy France, a puppet regime led by Philippe Pétain. This way, it looked like France had left the Allied side and joined the Axis powers. Hitler thought that the French people would be compliant with the Vichy regime, but a group of French men and women decided that they wouldn't sit around and do nothing. These people were the French resistance. The French resistance was arranged quickly after the German army destroyed France in just 5 weeks. At first, they were comprised of many different cells, working separately to anger the Germans. These cells were broken up by political views or religion. There were people of different classes: professors, students, Catholics, Jews, liberals, communists, and many more. The importance of having different cells was substantial. In case one cell was destroyed by the Nazis, there would still be many other cells still alive to carry out the fight against the German occupiers. However, not all resistance members fought the Germans with guns.
So at that point, I go into hiding. I'm helped by a French Jewish underground group. They were the Scouts, the Jewish Scouts of France. The French had Scouts and Catholic Scouts and Protestant Scouts and Jewish Scouts.
Edith Meyer-Cord was a 10-year-old Jewish girl living in France during World War II. The Jewish Scouts of France helped her hide from the Germans. Another non-violent form of the French resistance were newspapers. One of these papers was the Combat newspaper. Founded in 1941, the goal of this newspaper was to tell the remaining French citizens to fight against the Nazis. These rebels, whether violent or peaceful, were extremely brave. They risked their lives to fight the Nazis because they loved their country so much and hated to see it in Hitler's hands. If a French resistance member was ever caught, they were executed, so they hid their bases in the mountains and were extremely careful about their operations. However, the rest of the French people acted normal, so the French resistance could blend in with the public, which lent an element of surprise when attacking German occupiers. De Gaulle famously proclaimed, "But has the last word been said? Must we abandon all hope? Is our defeat final and irremediable?" To those questions I answer, no. Speaking in full knowledge of the facts, I ask you to believe me when I say that the cause of France is not lost. The very factors that brought about our defeat may one day lead us to victory. I, General de Gaulle, now in London, call on all French officers and men who are at present on British soil, or faced by the bewilderment of my countrymen, by the disintegration of a government enthralled to the enemy, by the fact that the institutions of my country are incapable at the moment of functioning. I, General de Gaulle, a French soldier, I, General de Gaulle, undertaking this national task here in England, realize that I now speak for France. In the name of France, I make the following solemn declaration. It is the bounden duty of all Frenchmen who still bear arms to continue the struggle, for them to lay down their arms, to evacuate any position of military importance, or to agree to hand over any part of French territory, however small, to enemy control, would be a crime against our country. De Gaulle was a hero to many resistance members and was a rallying point for them. However, many resistance members disliked his political views and didn't listen to him. As the years moved on through Nazi occupation of France, the resistance members still fought the Germans. They derailed trains, disrupted Nazi supply lines, and helped the Allies by giving reconnaissance reports. The United Kingdom airdropped supplies to the French resistance, including British Sten guns, silenced pistols, explosives, and radios. These were extremely helpful towards the resistance cause. One trick the resistance learned to do was to wrap wet rags around their gun barrels. This reduced overheating and gave heavier firepower to the gun. In addition, they also had weapons that they captured from Nazi soldiers. These included Kar-98K rifles and MP-40 submachine guns. One of the important roles of the French resistance was diverting German troops to France and away from the front lines of war. Hitler couldn't let the French resistance continually destroy his lines of transportation back in France. Consequently, Hitler had to send back some troops to fight and capture French resistance members. This meant that he had less troops on the Eastern Front to fight the Soviet Union, which was beneficial towards the Allies. Eventually, all the different cells of the French resistance banded together. They became a key role in the successful landing in Normandy. They helped the Allies by deploying deception tactics to make the Nazis believe that the Allies would land their troops at Calais. They also did their best to impede on all Nazi reinforcements from arriving at Normandy and fought alongside American troops on D-Day. They liberated many towns until on August 25, 1944, Paris was liberated. French resistance played a vital role in the turnout of World War II. They helped the Allies successfully land at Normandy during D-Day and were an effective resistance group against the Nazis. In the end, they were triumphant against their enemies and are remembered throughout Europe as the saviors of France.